Hey y'all, welcome back to the New Alabamian. Today, I have my wife here, Katie. If you don't know me, I'm Trent Ford, and this is my wife, Katie Ford. We're going to discuss freedom and the role of government today. One of the things that we are going to talk about and wrestle with during this conversation is what is freedom and what is the role of government? So we're talking about this because it's the 250th year, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.
Mm-hmm. And we've been wrestling with it a lot because, you're running for government. So what role does a legislature play in our freedoms and in a democracy?
And what role does the executive, the judicial, what role do any of them play in government that is for the people? Kind of leads into the Declaration of Independence, which was the language is agreed upon on July 4th, 1776. So let's read this snippet. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among them the powers of the earth, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
So I guess the first thing we need to touch on is the key points in that. We didn't read the whole Declaration of Independence. That's the part that most people know, though, is the unalienable rights of people. All men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
So let's go through those one at a time instead of just jumping and listing them all. Mm-hmm. So first we have all men are created equal. What's that mean to you?
And that we all have value. From a Christian perspective, we are all equal in the sight of God, whether we're man, woman, black, white, Asian, whatever. We all have equal value. Now, of course, in the founding of the country, that wasn't always true. That wasn't true from the very beginning because they had slaves. But that has been an aspiration for the country over the years, over the history of our country, because we have gradually, moved toward that more perfect union of giving more rights to people. Through abolishing slavery and then giving men, black men the right to vote, and then women the right to vote, and more protection for workers so that they can, have more equal rights. And then through the civil rights movement, making sure that even if you do have technically the right to vote, you have, that vote still matters equally. And so, and I would argue now we're trying to fight for that even more through equal rights of, women weren't treated equally in the workforce for a long time.
Women didn't even get the right to vote till the 1900s.
Yeah. So we've been moving toward that through our whole history. So that's just something that I've been percolating on. And are we really equal for purposes of government and determining our own government if we don't have an equal say, if we don't have an equal vote.
Well, that goes into the next section of the endowed by their creator with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So where do our rights come from? So we don't believe that the government is what grants us those specific rights. That's what unalienable means. It means that this is something that can be determined. And it goes into and says the laws of nature, and nature is God. That wasn't specifically a nod to the Christian God, but just saying the rules of the world, the laws of the world, and how the world operates. So when they wrote this, they were saying the world is created in such a way that humans have these rights and nobody should be able to take them away. And life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
So life is pretty obvious, right? We're not supposed to kill others, or it gets tricky when you talk about punishment for crimes, and we won't. That's a rabbit hole we don't need to touch today.
If you want to go back to the Old Testament, it's "Thou shalt not murder" is the most accurate translation, and murder is separate from justified or punishment.
Liberty is a little more abstract because liberty depends on your definition of it, right? What would you say liberty is in this context?
I guess liberty is really just kind of freedom of personhood. And that probably sounds like a technical definition, but it's just you're free to do what you want to do in certain ways. What do you
that ties into pursuit of happiness, right? Liberty could be seen as freedom of movement, freedom of choice, freedom over your person. Pursuit of happiness is even more abstract than liberty, right?
And that kind of goes back to a little bit of a history lesson, is that most people couldn't choose any job throughout human history. You were pretty much limited to either what you were being assigned to do or what your family did. And so this idea of coming here, that this new country, we're recognizing the right to the pursuit of happiness, which is in some way saying we can go after any goal we want. And so kind of liberty and pursuit of happiness are tied together for me.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of people don't think about how different this would have been in 1776. Before then, basically every government was a monarchy or some form of autocracy where there was a ruler, and the people didn't get to make a choice. They had class systems, and so they didn't get to make a choice on their jobs, their occupation, even who they married, things like that. So that's a very radical or new idea at the time.
I kind of want to touch back on a kind of a nerdy point, if that's all right. So when we go back to happiness, people nowadays mostly only associate that with the emotion of being happy. But that's not really what they were going for. This is kind of closer to meaning and usage as satisfaction, and it's got elements of self-determination in it. So that's what I was trying to say before. Just wanted to clarify that the pursuit of happiness is really the pursuit of satisfaction, and the liberty would be the self-determination aspect.
And then the third part that's mentioned in that opening of the Declaration of Independence is that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So, like I said before, that mostly it was a ruling class that inherited their wealth, inherited their power. They were appointed by a king or whatever. It wasn't the people deciding how they were going to be ruled. And so the consent of the governed is the fundamental belief of our country, that we have a right to choose our government.
And a lot at that time, it was throughout that period of history and previously, it was also like other countries kind of saying how that country gets governed, because we've had different countries take over and then say, hey, this is your government now. And that's kind of what British colonialism was.
Yeah.
You go to a new area and you say, okay, the British government is in charge of you now.
I mean, that's literally what we did with the Native Americans, unfortunately. I mean, like I said, our history, this isn't perfect. These were our goals, but we all obviously didn't live up to them throughout our history. But
that goes back to the government's, what is the government's job? And I think that in this document, the Declaration of Independence lays it out that the government's job is to protect the rights of the people.
Right. It's not just whoever is in charge gets to have all the power, all the money, and do whatever they want. The government is meant to serve the people, to secure those rights of the people.
So when we start talking about rights, that's directly tied into what we talk about with freedom. So let's go ahead and move to that. So there's a book called On Freedom by Timothy Snyder, and it's good, but it's pretty academic in some areas. But one of the big concepts in there is the difference between negative freedom and positive freedom. Why don't you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, Timothy Snyder is a historian who studies different forms of government, specifically like autocracies and dictatorships around the world, and how the government relates to the people. And so he frames it as negative freedom versus positive freedom. Negative being the government is just out of your way, not doing anything, and positive being the government is taking an active role in securing your rights and helping the person succeed. Another way of putting that would be freedom from versus freedom to. I've heard that phrase, and sometimes that's a little easier to explain, like freedom from government, tyranny, oppression versus freedom to make your own choices, freedom to, have a successful job.
So if I'll kind of say, so negative freedom is freedom from something, which just means nobody's stopping you from doing something. And then positive freedom is freedom to do something. And that's more when you actually have what you need. Like if we say we have the freedom to have education, roads, healthcare, security, and then that allows you to have more. That allows you to have a bigger range of things that you can do because you have the freedom to do something. So
one of the things that kind of gets lost in American history, I know I didn't learn this until I was an adult. I never heard this topic before, about freedom from versus freedom to, and like how the government secures the rights of people to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and really securing the rights of the individual. And before around 1900, like up until around 1900, late 1800s, that meant the government should be small so that it doesn't infringe on people's life too much, and they get to do, a lot of it was like family farms and things, and so that was freedom. And then you get corporations.
Well, even before that, it'll be starting with like the railroads and all that. So that'll really be like the big start where you really need something to step in and kind of keep the corporations from overrunning regular people.
Yeah. And of course, this is after the government has stepped in and said, slavery is wrong, all men are free, we are securing the rights of black people.
Still we're working for women at the time.
Right.
But had to
start somewhere.
Start somewhere.
So, yeah, and then you get the railroads and those just huge corporations that were basically abusing their workers, hoarding all the wealth, and people were living in squalor. They had no way of really rising.
Yeah, this is when you this is where we get the term robber barons from, because it felt like they were literally robbing everybody else to make their money and then keeping everybody else poor. And so that's when some of the government regulations started to be needed, and it showed like the government needed to act as a counterbalancing force. So that means the government actually needed more power. I mean, maybe it's not the first time, but it's one of the most visible times that the government. And this kind of goes like when I talk about stuff with people ask me if I'm like big or small government, and I always just say I like right-sized government, because like sometimes you do want the government out of the way, but sometimes you need the government to be able to step in and protect you, because as a regular single person, I can't stop what a giant corporation wants to do, but the government could stop them if it's going to do things that's harmful to me and to other people.
Yeah. So, yeah, Timothy Snyder talks about this too, in terms of, like, if the government is not there to protect people. Now, once you have the rise of corporations and, you know, these ultra wealthy people that have a lot of power, if the government's not there, somebody's going to come in and take that spot. And it's going to be the richest people with the most power. And they're going to come in and take away your rights. They're going to fill the gap that government leaves. So that really is more visible in the early 1900s when they start regulating businesses, anti-monopoly laws, things like you shouldn't be able to put formaldehyde in milk to make it stretch further. Like, you're literally poisoning people and they can't do anything about it. So.
And we say the early 1900s, but like there's a reason that we had the stock market crash. There was for several reasons, but a big one was because there was just so much wealth concentration that people were...
The banks were out of control.
Yeah, the banks were out of control. The corporations were out of control. And so then we have this giant crash. And that affects everybody and leads into the Great Depression.
Well, before that, so the early 1900s is what's called the Progressive Era, because it's called that a progressive because the government is taking a more of a role in securing those rights for people. And then you get, and then it kind of fades away, and the government and the corporations accumulate so much wealth in the 20s, and then there's the crash of 1929, and then you've got FDR coming in and saying, we've got to do something different.
Yeah, and I know maybe this is not exactly correct anymore, but I was basically taught the only reason we got out of the Great Depression was because of World War II.
Yeah,
but
that's what I was taught.
That's not accurate. What actually got us out was setting up things that brought wealth back into the regular person working. And we did a lot of public works. We did a lot of social, like, safety net and institution style things that brought more power back to regular people, and it deconcentrated the wealth.
Yeah. So maybe some people don't know what social safety net is. I know I didn't really learn about that in school, like what a social safety net really was.
And so that'll be when we start getting things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, things that just act as a buffer against like all the vagaries of life. So
I think one of the stories is the lady that wanted, what was it? Was it Social Security? And really pushed for that and helped set it up. What came from, or no, maybe it was, Social Security, because that's for older people. And she saw during the Great Depression, literally like widows eating out of trash cans because they had no way to support themselves. So that idea of, we need to protect people from the government. We also need to protect people from corporations, but also, as they get older and they can't work, and have that buffer between them and just poverty and abject poverty.
So that kind of gets into a word that has got a bad rap, and that's liberalism. So that really is just meaning that the government takes a role in providing safety nets, and that we have these common values that we agree on, like democracy and social safety nets to keep people from basically getting put out on the street as soon as they're not able to work anymore.
Well, also, I mean, democracy is such a vague word nowadays. Technically, you have democracies where people vote, but their vote doesn't mean anything because everybody knows it's rigged, and so the liberal democracy is really fundamentally like your voice matters. The government secures the rights of the people. You have a basic social safety net so that people, aren't starving, and they have adequate health care. They have education, and also the rule of law. Everybody's treated equally. That was not the case in the South, particularly. I mean, I've heard historians say that they don't actually view the South as a democracy during the Jim Crow era because the rule of law was not applied equally.
And so, for those of you not familiar with the time frame, that's all the way up until the 1960s.
Mm-hmm. From the end of slavery in 1865, there was a brief period where the government did secure the rights of Black Americans, but then after the federal government left, the South reinstituted black codes and Jim Crow laws, and basically blacks did not have any rights in the South, and they would be, unfairly tried, killed. Nobody would be held accountable for killing them. Just all kinds of horrific things. And so that's part of liberal democracy, is that the government protects the rights of everybody and the rule of law is applied equally.
So guys, I'll kind of summarize a bit. You don't want, if you have too small a government, it can't protect you. If you have too big of a government, then it can step on you. So what is big enough? So that kind of goes back to, we have an adequate social safety net, we have roads, infrastructure. Ideally, there's some form of healthcare system. We're working on that one here. We have worker protections, which still working on that. That's a lot better than it used to be if we go look historically, but more is better. And it kind of gets into like regulations about what corporations and even other people can do that affects you. We don't want people dumping mercury into the rivers. And then it also comes down to the public education system, which is really undervalued nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Things that the individual can't do for themselves, like or small communities. Like, can a small community actually supply their own roads? Like, maybe a little bit, but we need overall government to provide the infrastructure for roads to connect everybody, and so that we can actually drive safely. Can an individual fight a corporation that's putting poison in their water? No. But the government can step in and regulate that. Can we get adequate education for everybody without government assistance? Like, yes, we had it in the past where it was just, the one-room schoolhouse, but that was not...
That also wasn't education for everybody.
Right. So education for everybody is a role of the government.
Because education is what allows you to be, like, a good citizen and to have better opportunities in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So...
That would go back to the pursuit of happiness. Can you really pursue happiness if you are stuck and you don't have any resources, you don't have the knowledge to succeed in a career? I mean, think about people who can't read. Can they really do, well, what can they do?
You can do some jobs, but overall, if everybody couldn't read, society would end up breaking down based off of how we've built it. Because we have accumulated so much knowledge to keep a lot of things running that you have to get that knowledge from somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Government is meant to protect the rights of the people and do the things that individuals can't do on their own. They can't, provide all of the roads that they need. they don't have the resources for that. They can't provide their own education, at least to the extent of educating everybody. That should be a right for everybody to have adequate education.
So let's kind of go into the 60s and 70s when we started getting the civil rights era, and we actually started trying to fulfill these tenets of what is, as people say, small L liberalism.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people think about that time as being great, and people had a lot of money. The wages were expanding. Well, that was because the government actually stepped in and regulated corporations. I mean, the tax bracket was like the top tax bracket was like 80% or 90%, something really, really high, because it discouraged the hoarding of wealth.
Bracket, that means like how much taxes you had to pay on your income.
Right, like the top earners, like the top 1%, had to pay like 80 or 90%. Like that, to us nowadays, that sounds absurd.
And that
right?
was very effective at keeping the CEO pay and the highest level pay from completely outstripping the regular workers, because instead of paying that much extra in taxes, they would usually they would put that back into the company, and some of that would go back to the workers instead of them wanting to have to pay that to the government.
Right. So you have a choice of either paying it to the government, or the government will then use it to reinvest in people and resources and jobs, or the company, instead of giving it to the government, can actually give it to their workers. So, and that was a time where wages increased dramatically. People had a lot of extra money. That's where you get, the American dream of a house and a car, and you get to go on vacation and things like that. People don't feel like they can do that now. And also, government regulated industry and like built highways and the postal service. They owned or regulated parts of life that were required to succeed.
Yeah. And so then that gets into it was healthcare, infrastructure, and roads. And they had regulation on how telecommunications worked and broadcasting,
like fair information, accurate information.
Yeah. So how's that compared to now? That was 50 years ago now.
Mm-hmm. Or more, depending on when you're counting. But yeah, at least 50 years ago, and now we are back to the point where we have the largest wealth gap since the Great Depression hit, since the stock market crash. And we have the Republicans are saying that the goal of government is to be smaller and smaller and smaller, deregulate everything. They don't want to have regulations on companies dumping poison and toxins in our water, or
in Alabama they specifically have said that we are not allowed to regulate anything around the environment or our ecosystem or our rivers or any of that any stricter than whatever EPA says. Well, EPA just doesn't even cover certain things, so that means, according to what the legislature in Alabama tried to say, that we can't regulate those anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's ridiculous. We should be able to determine regulations. Now, people will say, well, they said it has to be such and such. The burden of proof that they put out to be able to make these regulations is such that you can't fulfill them unless it's already done harm. So if something could cause cancer, so you would normally not do it, they would not let you stop from doing it until after it's been proven that it gave somebody cancer. And proving something is much harder than saying, well, we know this can cause blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. So, everybody, tons of people have to get cancer and die before we actually can do anything about it. And that's ridiculous. And that, fundamentally, the position of we want to protect corporations over the people is not a traditional view in the United States. I mean, even back
That's been a view that's been paid for by the corporations.
Yeah.
And especially over the past 30, 40 years, one of the things that I talk to people about, and we've had this discussion many times, is that corporations are not people. Corporations should not be treated like people, and money is not free speech.
Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court just ruled that it was. Again.
That's a separate issue.
That's another rabbit hole, but...
But, okay, so some of these people will say that that they're reformers, but really a lot of the people pushing for all this corporation getting more power I would say are being more radical.
Mm-hmm. That's not what historically was viewed in the country. Like, even back in the Articles of Confederation, there was work toward making a level playing field for people, like with the what was it called, the Northwest Ordinance. I recently read about that, which I didn't know about, but that was in the Articles of Confederation, where they they abolished the rule that said the firstborn son inherited everything. That was a way of starting to level the playing field so that people could have a chance to succeed. Now, if you've got I think it's like $50 trillion has been moved from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. I might have to check those numbers, but it's an extraordinary amount of money that the top 1% has now. And that's why people feel like we can't get ahead.
I have a few snippets from a thing that I want to read you. And this is for you at home as well. I want you to kind of think about where you think I'm getting this from. So it starts with a quote from Lincoln. And it says, "Calls to the minds of all Americans the great truth first spoken by Abraham Lincoln. The legitimate object of government is to do for a community of people whatever they need to have done, but cannot do it all, or cannot so well do for themselves in their separate and individual capacities. But in all that people can individually do as for themselves, government ought not to interfere." So that's the Lincoln quote. Mm-hmm. And then I'll read you another snippet from this party's platform. "We shall ever build anew, that our children and their children, without distinction because of race, creed, or color, may know the blessings of our free land. We believe that basic to governmental integrity are unimpeachable ethical standards and irreproachable personal conduct by all people in the government. We shall continue our insistence on honesty as an indispensable requirement of public service. We shall continue to root out corruption whenever and wherever it appears. We are proud of and shall continue our far-reaching and sound advances in matters of basic human needs, expansion of Social Security, broadened coverage in unemployment insurance, improved housing, and better health protections for all our people. We are determined that our government remain warmly responsive to urgent social and economic problems of our people. To these beliefs we commit ourselves as we present this record and declare our goals for the future." So,
I'll be honest, when I first heard that read, I thought that it was the Democrats, because they talks about race, equal rights between race and creed, and talks about Social Security and health care. And I mean, recently, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, Republican, talked about that they're going to be cutting Social Security soon. And so
I'll read another snippet that answers who this is from. "The Republican Party was formed 100 years ago to preserve the nation's devotions to these ideals. They had also said, our government was created by the people for all the people, and it must serve no less a purpose." This is the Republican Party's platform of 1956. So, in 70 years, they are going for something, from my view, very different from what they were putting out during this time, where they talk about people have rights, we're going to try to improve housing, we're improving health protections, we want to expand Social Security, we want to advance the matters of all basic human needs. Mm-hmm. And another little snippet on here, proclaim that the freedoms and rights of men come from the Creator and not from the state. So this goes back to the unalienable rights, that the government shouldn't get to determine certain things. But you also need the government to step in and provide better outcomes in other areas.
And now it feels like the Republican Party is more focused on tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations and protecting money as free speech than anything else. And that has been a philosophy for 40 something years now. It started in the 80s where it was, if we just cut taxes on the rich, then they're going to funnel it back into the economy and boost the economy. But it hasn't happened.
That's been proven not to work
because
by this point.
People are greedy.
people will only act as good as they have to in a lot of situations. Now, you may say the common person. Well, the common person is not the one that becomes a CEO, because to become at the very top 1%, you have to make decisions that the regular person wouldn't make. And you usually have a higher focus on how to make money. So,
now, some people may say, well, why are you just picking on the Republicans right now? Because it seems like they have just dramatically shifted from what their platform was. I mean, Lincoln was a Republican.
Let's talk about the context for that quote from Lincoln. So, Lincoln's quote that the Republican Party was quoting was a response to wealthy slaveholders that were in the South, and that they argued that government should protect their property and that only elites knew how to run the economy. That kind of sounds familiar.
Yeah, kind of sounds like only we know how to rule and you just have to follow, and only the wealthy know how to, I mean, they control our, basically everything, our internet, the way we get our information, the airwaves, like all of the utilities that we use now.
Everything that we do that used to be like a more public kind of thing, like before everything was digital, there were still public squares and things like that. And you had, this is a separate tangent, but all of the proliferation of newspapers before, and now a lot of that's been condensed down to like there's some national stuff, and you'll have like one or two small local things if they haven't been pushed out of business, but that almost everybody goes to something owned by one of these giant companies. You have Meta, you have Google, you have Apple, you have OpenAI, Anthropic, you have Elon Musk's and whatever companies he's decided to jam together in a trench coat now.
Yeah. So the idea that the white Southern slaveholders had was the government should only protect my property and nothing else.
And at this time they were saying that slaves were their property. They didn't view slaves as people.
So the Republican Party was formed as a response to that. The Republican Party wasn't at the beginning of the, at the time of the first, presidents. That wasn't formed until 1850s when there was a response to, abolition and wanting to free
They actually
slaves.
had several kind of parties cycle through for a while.
So kind of, it echoes today with these giant corporations saying that you have to protect my wealth and you can't take it from me, and the government should just protect me, and I don't care about the rest of the people. And I don't need regulations. I don't need to, adhere to anti-monopoly laws or anything like that.
So the Republicans have completely switched from where they started and even where they pretty much were in 1956.
Now, to be fair, the Democrats have switched too, because in the 50s, the Democrats were the ones promoting segregation.
Well, the Democrat Party was actually split in the U.S. Yeah. The Southern Democrats, if you look at the traditional right-left scale, the Southern Democrats aligned with the more fringe positions of like treating people as objects, and so were considered like more on the authoritarian side than the Republicans at the time in the South. And so now they've went to the more balanced towards libertarian, because you have right, left, and then you have authoritarian, libertarian. And maybe that's too much of a digression, but
now it's kind of, it used to be that the Democrat Party was kind of split between the ones in the North that wanted to have those values of regulation and protecting private property businesses.
More of an
but
FDR
also,
Democrat.
Yeah. But the Southern Democrats were like George Wallace, who was like segregation forever. And then you get the shifting where all of the Southern Democrats that were called Dixiecrats end up shifting over to the Republican Party in the 70s and 80s.
Yep.
And then in the
and
80s...
it kind of trickled all the way through to the 2000s.
Yeah, because Alabama still was kind of a holdover of the Dixiecrats and didn't really... That's why people were like, oh, Alabama used to be solid Democrat. Well, it was a holdover from the Dixiecrats because we have a history of racism in the state. I mean, let's just be honest.
That's something that you have to understand that to really see what the parties are now. Mm-hmm. So if you're... for those of you saying, well, you're just bad-mouthing the Republicans. No, I mean, at different points in time, both parties have done bad stuff. I'm an independent, so I think that I can look at this and say they did bad and they did bad.
And
but right
even
now,
like
the
before,
Republicans are acting up.
And previously in the last, 10, 20 years, the Democrats haven't done much to regulate business either. No. It's only recently that more people are saying, look, this is crazy. This wealth consolidation at the top is hurting everybody. Why can we not make government serve the people like it was supposed to be? In the Declaration of Independence, it says we are supposed to secure the rights of all people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that is not being done now by either side, really. I mean, there's more young people coming in, running, that are saying, look, we need a change.
But the establishment Democrats here are, I'm not going to say they're all bad. I don't know all of them. But they don't have enough power to do anything right now. And the Republicans here have a supermajority, which means they can kind of push through whatever they want. And as it's been described to me, there's basically two wings of the Republican Party too right now. And so they can't always agree on everything either.
Yeah, in the state.
In this state.
Now, at the national level, it's been completely consolidated under the more extreme wing.
At least now. It's attempting to.
Yeah. Coming back to the beginning. So, like, kind of coming back to the beginning of all this, what does it mean to be free and live in a free country? And what was the ideals declared in the Declaration of Independence? And what does it mean to have the consent of the governed?
So really, the people should be able to have a say over how government works for them. It shouldn't be dictated by whoever has the most money. It shouldn't be dictated by the party telling the people, you have to do this. And it shouldn't be parties picking their voters. It should be the people, the voters, picking their representatives, choosing what government does, and government should be able to set boundaries for how behavior is done. We have laws, so we already police people. The idea that we can't police corporations and set regulations on them is ridiculous.
So, the consent of the governed, that feels like we're losing it right now. And that's what a lot of our work right now, me and you together, trying to run a campaign, other people that we've met around the state that
our
are
volunteers,
other people like the Yellowhammer Party that's trying to do something different, that says we need more consent from the people. Like, there are so many elections in Alabama, where it goes uncontested, or only the Republicans run and their primary is the only decision, or they just know that the Republican's always going to win, even if the Democrat runs, and so they don't even try to listen to the people or do anything to help the people because, well, they're just going to vote for an R anyway. And in some places in the state, like in the Southern Black Belt, that's the same way with the D. They're just always going to vote for the D, no matter what. And so when you have this extreme polarization, it devolves into the parties just doing whatever they want and not actually being accountable to the people.
Yeah, parties should have to work hard. They should have to go listen to the people and try to represent the people. And that also goes back to like the national level stuff has really changed since money became speech, and now ads and your algorithms and everything can just be fed to you, and you see that, and that influences, even if you disagree with what you see, every time you see something, it affects you.
Yeah, because as you were saying in 2013, I think it was 2013 or 2011 when it was Citizens United case in the Supreme Court where it basically said there's no limit on money that can be spent in elections because money is free speech, which is absolutely ridiculous. But that has paved the way for just a flood of money coming from all kinds of places. And basically whoever has the most money buys the election.
Now, you don't always win if you have the most money, but the person with the least money doesn't usually win.
And the people and the corporations and the wealthiest people can donate a lot more to the people they like than just you or me if we were like, I really like that candidate, I want to help them out, but we don't have millions of dollars to spend. And so...
And we're not trying to court corporations because I want to do things that's going to help people. The corporations being able to pay for their politicians that are going to help the corporations over people should be wrong. Mm-hmm. But that's going off on tangents.
And then the gerrymandering has gotten totally out of control with parties picking their voters. And that's something that the state can regulate too. If we get people in office that actually care about representing people and letting people have a fair vote.
A lot of people don't realize this. But when the 2030 census is going to happen, a lot of the South is going to get more representation in the national level. So how that gets divided is going to be determined by this election for people getting in and getting known. And then especially in the 2030 election, for the people that are going to be going into that legislative session, they're going to have an influence over how the maps get drawn. And we just saw the Republicans in Alabama will be happy to go do a special session to gerrymander maps. Well, they have already said that they would like to make everything 7-0 at the federal level.
Meaning seven Republicans, no
0
Democrats,
no independents. I just want things to be fair and balanced, and I want our representatives to represent the people. Like, if you have 40% Democrats in the state, it seems reasonable that like 40% of your national representatives are Democrat too, or however you want to do those numbers. So
is it actually consent of the governed if, I've heard people say, well, we have a majority of Republicans in this state, so yeah, our entire state should be Republican, 7-0. That's not consent of the governed because you have 40% or whatever the breakdown is. I've heard different numbers, but somewhere around 30-40% that consistently vote Democrat in the state. And so is it really consent of the governed if you've got 7 representatives for Republicans and 0 Democrats? When really, in reality, 40% of your population is Democrat?
You know what? It's another thing, because of how we do parties in Alabama and how the U.S. does parties overall. When you actually do polling, the U.S. is actually about 41% independent now, which is like the highest numbers that it's been in a long time. I don't have the exact stat for that off the top of my head, but if you have 41% of people as independents and the other ones are roughly divided evenly across the U.S., that tells you that neither one of them is the majority overall. Just a lot of people have gave up on voting too. So Alabama's vote numbers are low, so whoever does vote plays an outsized part in getting to pick who is our leaders. So that's another thing that we need to work on in this state. But so how do we wrap this up? We've kind of went on some tangents. There's a historian named Heather Cox Richardson. She writes books, she writes a newsletter, and one of the things she says is that democracy is hard work, but that it's joyful work. And I think that really resonates. You have to look back to kind of the southern traditions of joy to understand it in Alabama, of how joy isn't about being happy. And this almost goes back to the word happiness, and the Declaration of Independence is different. So joy in this instance doesn't mean happy, but it goes back to kind of like fulfilling and what you feel like you should do, and like soul satisfying. So if you say you should be joyful in the Lord, it's not about being happy, because things are going to suck and you're going to have to work hard and you're going to have to try, and we're going to do things that make you uncomfortable, but it's worth it. And that's why I'm doing this. And I hope that you do too, so that we can preserve our democracy, that we all have better outcomes, and that we can have a government that actually cares about the consent of the governed. I'm Trent Ford. I'm Katie Ford. Bye, guys.